This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal, health, tax, professional advice. We're not responsible for any losses, damages, or liabilities that may arise from the use of this podcast. This podcast is not intended to replace professional medical advice. The views expressed in this podcast may not be those of the host or the management. This podcast may contain adult themes, so parental discretion is advised. So welcome, welcome, welcome. Today's guest is someone who is about to challenge everything you thought you knew about trauma healing. She's not just a survivor. She's a warrior, a healer, and a game changer in the world of trauma recovery. So Sandra Cruz, I want to welcome you to Modern Titles to Woman Unplugged podcast. And Sandra is a certified trauma healer and a publisher, an author. So if you want to expand on your credentials and, give us a little background, you may go ahead.
Thank you so much, Lorna. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast.
You're most welcome.
I'm Sandra Cruz. I'm originally from Germany, in case you wonder about my little accent. I'm living in Newfoundland, Canada with my husband and my son, and I'm a trauma survivor. I was molested when I was 12 years old. I was sexually harassed at the age of 14. I was bullied in school from almost the entire class from the age of 16 to 17. I was sexually assaulted multiple times between the age of 19 and 25. I was raped at 22. And when I went to see my psychologist a couple of years after I was raped, he dismissed me after our intake session with the words, "I believe you've already worked through it all. What am I supposed to do?"
Oh, wow. Yes. So your personal story of overcoming trauma is incredibly powerful. What was the turning point when you realized that you had to take healing into your own hands? What was the turning point there?
Well, I guess the turning point came after the psychologist because that's when I hit rock bottom. Because I was deserted by family and friends, and now even the health professionals who were supposed to be trained to understand that I'm still dealing with trauma. And just because I wasn't sobbing during my session doesn't mean I wasn't still dealing with it. I just was able to suppress it well enough to talk about it. And it took me a while to realize that the only way for me to heal is finding my own way. So when you're at rock bottom, you have two choices. You can either stay down there and nothing will ever change, or you become your own warrior and you climb back out.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I'm Leo, so I'm a fighter by nature. And I decided this wasn't it. I was in my early 20s and I had hopes, I had dreams, and I knew staying on rock bottom, they would not come true.
You say that mainstream trauma professionals can only guide clients as far as they've healed themselves. How does self-healing impact the effectiveness of trauma for trauma healers?
Well, the thing about the mental health system is that you go in for the right reasons. You want to help people. You want to help them heal. Most of them, at least the ones that I met, they didn't heal their own trauma. What I've heard from my clients so often is, well, my therapist got me this far. Now he says he can't help me anymore because we did everything we could, but he's not giving me suggestions on where to go next. Then other clients said, well, I just triggered my therapist with my story. Now, if my therapist cannot handle my story, how am I supposed to? And this just can't happen. That's why I'm saying you can only heal someone so far as you have healed yourself. Because let's imagine you have a client in front of you who's dealing with intense PTSD. If you're still suffering from that, how can you help them get through it? You can only help them to learn to cope because that's all you know. But if you have healed your PTSD, you know it's possible because you've done the work. And
Right.
then you can help someone else heal. And that is, in my opinion, missing in the mental health system. Because we go in for the right reasons, but we don't heal our trauma first.
But some of these persons who do trauma healing, don't they have persons that go to persons that they you know help them through their journey that they're going through, because it's an ongoing process, isn't it?
It is. But if you are in the mental health system, so of course you're going to someone who's also in the mental health system. You don't
Okay.
look outside the box, but outside the box is where you usually find the healing, because you have to think in broader terms. Like, think about the body. You have to focus on the whole body, on all three that we have. We have the physical, mental, emotional, and energetic body. And the
Yeah.
energy of our body can be measured and be proven that it's actually there. So trauma is also stuck in the energy. And that's something that I discovered on my own healing journey and now practice with my clients.
Okay. I have a question further down, so we can expand on that a little bit more.
Of
Can you
course.
walk us through the four keys of absolute trauma healing and why they're essential, the four keys of trauma healing?
Well, the four keys of trauma healing is first that your therapist has fully healed themselves so that they know it's possible and not get triggered by you. Then you have to focus on the whole body, like I just said. You also have to think about the generational and the ancestral trauma that we're carrying with us, like how we were raised. We were all raised from trauma because that's what the generations before know. And then it's the client participation, which means when you go to a therapist and you expect that a therapist fixes you, it's not going to work, because trauma healing is inside work. So your therapist can guide you to your truth so you can heal, but you have to participate, whatever it takes, to work with your therapist. And those are the four keys.
You mentioned for, a few minutes ago that trauma gets stored in our mental, emotional, and energetic bodies. Why is it critical to address all three of them?
Because science tells us that trauma gets stuck in the body. That's somatic psychology, meaning the body remembers, especially when it comes to sexual trauma, physical trauma. The body remembers. So trauma is stored in the body. Trauma is also stored in the mind because we remember and we don't want to remember. And trauma is stuck, of course, in the energy field because that's where all the emotions sit. So you have to address all three to bring true healing. Now, the interesting thing about energy, meaning Reiki, for example,
Right.
is that when you are in a full-blown PTSD or panic attack, with just releasing the energy this panic or anxiety attack brings with it, you can calm down your clients within minutes, because it's really just the energy that's making it so intense that you feel you can't get out of. So the one thing that's really missing in the mental health system is focusing on the energy and releasing it.
So your method that the method that you use, uh, you stated that it ensures lasting transformation rather than temporary relief. Could you
Yes,
could you expound on that a little bit first?
sure. Well, the method that I use is focused on the trigger. So directly going to the trigger and releasing it means the trigger is not coming back. What I always try to explain to my clients, it is just as hard to release the trigger than it is to suppress the trigger, like trying to push it back down that it's not
Right.
coming up again. But as long as it's still there, it will keep on coming up. And every time it's going to be stronger because it wants to be released. But if you release the trigger, it's gone and it doesn't come back. So which is the difficult part you want to go? Releasing it, going through it one more time, or suppressing it that you don't have to go through it again and again and again and again. So that's what I do with my clients. And the way I work with my clients is as gentle as possible, because having to experience trauma is tough, but healing from it shouldn't have to be.
Right.
So it can be gentle if we lean into it and focus on releasing the trigger.
So how do you know when somebody says that they no longer have the lingering energetic trauma and that they're moved on? How do you really know? What are the signs to say that this has really occurred?
Yes, I have clients, of course, I have clients who have fully
Yeah,
healed, they live their best lives ever because they have really released all the major traumas. I mean, there will always be mini triggers coming up, but they know how to deal with them themselves. And it's easy, and they're excited about another trigger is coming up because another thing of their past is releasing. That's what a trigger is. A trigger is really the guiding light of what you need still to heal within yourself.
right. So the people who are, who don't, the skeptics who doubt energy healing, how do you explain the scientific or experimental validity of it?
Well, that's always a challenge. Well, the thing is, when we think about energy, it goes over a lot of people's heads,
Hmm.
simply because it was never part of our upbringing, but it's part of who we are. And we use energy every day of our lives. For example, you cut your finger and it's bleeding.
Right,
So what happens next? There's scab covering the wound so that it
hmm,
can heal.
right.
Well, it's the body's own healing ability. Now, for one part, the energy is moving everything to the finger and help it heal. Now, if I add energy through Reiki, it will ultimately heal faster because the body absorbs the energy and uses it as it needs it.
Right.
Then when you think about you have a child and that child is falling and hits her knee, what do you want to do? The first thing you want to take her in your arms and then kiss it to make it better. You're focusing your mind on making your child feel better, less pain, that she's healing fast. That is using energy because your thoughts are energy. So you're focusing that on a specific outcome. And with that, the energy is going to that desire, that wish for the child to be
Okay.
better.
Hmm. In when we spoke, you mentioned a preliminary conversation. You mentioned ancestral and generational trauma. I know that in the Bible it talks about, that something like this exists because in the Bible it speaks about generational curses. If you look in Exodus, it talks about it and as being a consequence of sin. It can go to four generations, what one person did before. So I sort of that came to mind when we were speaking about ancestral and generational trauma. Is it something like that? And how does it affect people today?
Well, yes and no. It can be curses in terms of what someone did in the past. It can also be a family curse that was caused by trauma. The trauma that was never healed and turned into like a repetition throughout the generation. So every generation suffers from that same trauma in a different way. So to give you an example from my own family line, from my father's side, 3 generations ago, there was an uncle of mine who had a dairy farm. Was very successful. He was happily married and had 2 sons. And then his wife suddenly died, and he couldn't cope with that. So he started to drink, he started to gamble, and one night when he was severely drunk, he was gambling his everything away in one game of cards.
Oh, wow.
And yes, and that family from that guy who won that card game still owns the dairy farm today. So now imagine what this did to him and to his children. First, he lost his wife. He was in deep grief. Then he lost his home. He lost his business, everything. And the blame and the guilt he must have felt once he sobered up what he had done to his children. Now think about his children. They lost their mother. They basically lost their father to alcoholism,
Mm.
and they lost their only home they ever knew, and they lost their inheritance. They lost everything. Imagine how that will make them feel. All those limiting beliefs, like this, don't wish for anything big because you're going to lose it anyways. Stay in your lane, only do what you can. Make sure you always have enough. Make sure you have a roof over your head. So stop thinking big, stop dreaming, because that's dangerous. And now this is going through the generations, this belief. So father to child, child to next generation keeps on teaching that same belief because that trauma has never been healed. Now, in my family, I'm now the first to have my own business and actually published a book, which means I broke out of that mold that I was put in. Like this belief that life is hard, you have to work hard and be happy with what you got and all those things.
That was a good example because even even I know of a family where all the males, when they reach in the 40s, they just die in their sleep.
Mhm. That's a pattern.
Yeah, that's a pattern. But I think somebody said the autopsy said that they had something in in the anatomy of the buildup is that it caused a hemorrhage in the brain. I
Hmm.
don't know why when they reach that particular age it happens. I mean, I was sort of saying if you have something wrong in the brain, it can hit you at any time. But when they're in the 40s, that's when they go, all the males. Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
Well,
that's
this is a
interesting.
pattern.
Yeah.
To give you an example, if I may, from a client of mine. She
Yes.
had back pain in the middle of her back all her life, and the doctors couldn't figure out why. X-rays, everything came back normal. There was nothing that would explain the back pain. Then she said, well, her mother and grandmother had the same. So, and that's when I say, okay, there's a pattern. So if it goes through generations, there is a reason, which means that something happened that hasn't been healed. So we looked into our ancestral line, and to do that, I go a little more into spirituality. I use a pendulum and asking questions. And the story that I received, usually I see pictures in my mind when I ask.
Mhm.
And it was that it was a husband who was very abusive about 10 generations ago, who was pushing his wife to the floor. She was lying on her stomach, and he had his boot on her back. So that trauma was never healed. So energetically, you can clear trauma that has been there for a long time, or you don't know the person anymore. So we cleared it, and 3 days later, she messaged me and said, my back pain's gone. So that's again energy. So you can clear it however it's necessary. Now, with a curse, it could be karma. So that someone is carrying the karma from the family along, and you can clear the karma by, how should I put this? Usually there is some form of forgiveness that has to happen in order to clear that karma, whatever that was, and
Yeah.
that will clear it for the whole family line. Now, the important thing about clearing ancestral generational trauma is so that the next generation after you doesn't have to deal with that anymore. Because once you decide to heal that, the next generation doesn't have to deal with that.
Yes, I've heard about cases where um, a husband like he migrated and he started a family in the US and he left his family back home in the islands and he just didn't send anything for them, didn't help them or anything and abandoned them and he was living a wonderful life here. And then after a while everything just started to disappear and
Mm-hmm.
everybody people are saying is the woman was crying with all the children crying because they were suffering and that is why he started to lose all his stuff. Things just wasn't. And then he went to a church and the pastor told him that what he needs to do, he needs to make it right with the woman because her tears. has gone up to the Lord, you
Mm-hmm.
know. So
Yeah.
he needs to make it right with her. You know,
Mm-hmm.
that's yeah. So I can understand what you were saying there because you know I've seen it happening in the church environment also. So you know, a lot of us, even myself, you know, when we have loved ones that pass, um, we start asking, why did this happen? You know, why did this happen to me? I've lost a loved one, and you know, the person was a teacher. He was making an impact on young people's life. And I'm saying to myself, you have drug addicts out there trying to kill themselves every day and and they don't die. But you have somebody here who's, you know, just going about and doing good things to other people and they're taken. So all of us have the you know, why did this happen moment. So how do you guide, you know, your clients towards finding meaning in their pain?
Well, look at me. If I hadn't been through everything I've been through and was forced to find my own way of healing, I would not be able to do this fulfilling work. I would not have written my book. I would not sit here and tell people how they're supposed to heal their trauma because what they tried didn't work, because I experienced that. So our story is an opportunity. Trauma gives us an opportunity to grow beyond our expectations. Just imagine you had the perfect life. No trauma, no issues, nothing, everything were great. You would not need to evolve. You would simply stay the same.
Yeah, that's true.
But
We
through our story, we learn how strong we actually are. My clients always think they're so weak because they had been through trauma. They feel guilt and shame for letting it happen. And I just say, really? You're so strong. You went through all of this and you're still here. This is strength. Trauma survivors don't understand how strong they are because they only see the weakness in them. But once you've healed and you look back, you see what the story actually tried to tell you. It may have brought you to your purpose like it did for me. I can't imagine doing anything else. It makes me so happy working with people and helping them through their trauma. And for other people, it's growing beyond their expectations and finding something new, stepping out of the family dynamics to understand, well, this is not working, so I'm going to make it work my way now. So trauma really is the opportunity. But of course, when you're stuck in deep trauma, you would tell me, well, you're crazy. How can you think that? So once you're healed through it, then you see
Mhm.
actually what your story was supposed to do for you.
Yeah, I agree with you. And why I say that is that looking back on even some persons in my family that are helping others, it's like they had to go through the fire. They go through the fire, for lack of a better word. And then, you know, they can say, well, guess what? I went through that fire and I'm here. And I lived through it. I survived and I'm thriving. And you can do it too, you know?
Exactly.
Yes,
I'm no
yes.
different than other people.
Yeah,
If I
yeah.
can do it, so can you. I'm no
Yes.
different.
Yes, yes, yes. I believe that part there. Yeah. What does it mean to have or living in a traumatized home? And how does it affect one's ability to heal?
Well, that gets us back into energy.
Hmm.
What that means is, well, let's say you're in your home and you feel like, "Ugh, I don't want to do anything. I just want to lie there. It's, you know, you have no drive, you have no joy in your house. And then as soon as you leave your home, you're full of energy. And you're like,
Hmm.
yes, I can go and I want to do this and that. But as soon as you're back in your house, you feel blah. On the other hand, if you have a high vibrational home, which means every room in your house brings you joy and the energy is clear and it's bright, you love being at home. So, and a traumatized home is, well, your home takes on the energy just like you do. So let's say you have a friend come over who has problems with her partner and she is talking about it and crying and you're trying to help. That sadness is staying behind in the house.
Mm-hmm.
You come home from work, you're completely stressed, you're upset with something your boss said or a coworker, and you're lamenting about it. That energy stays in your home. You have an argument with your partner or you have a difficult relationship. That energy stays in your home. So, and that traumatizes a home, which means you don't feel comfortable in it. It's like when you're cleaning your home and it's spotless and it still feels dirty.
Mm-hmm.
That means a traumatized home. When you think about dust, what is dust? Dust is skin cells, hair, fluff from your clothes. It's basically discarded energy. So when you're dusting, you're actually clearing out the energy. And then your house feels better. That's
Yeah.
what it means a traumatized home.
Okay. So, um, how does your daily self-care, practice look like, and how does it contribute to your well-being?
Sure. Well, my secret self-care routine is that I only do what brings me joy.
Good
This
answer.
means,
Yes.
for example, I mean, it sounds like, yeah, great, how do you
Yeah.
do that? Well, for example, I have 4 bathrooms in my house. One day, if I feel I have to clean them, it's going to take the whole day. The next day, I may feel like I want to clean them today, so it takes me a couple hours. So on that day, cleaning the bathrooms brought me joy. Then another day, I may feel like I don't want to do anything today, I just want to read. So I do that within reason. I mean, I still have a business, but other than that, once the chores are done and everything is finished,
Right.
then I just sit down and have some music on and read, and it makes me happy. So always ask yourself every morning, what makes me happy today? What brings me joy
Mhm.
today? And then try and incorporate that into your day. And you'll see your life is going to change because you acknowledge your needs. That what
Mhm.
brings us joy is that what we need right now to feel good. Today it could be cooking, tomorrow it could be cleaning, the day after it could be going to the mall and just go window shopping. Whatever that is that brings you joy, try and incorporate that into your day.
Yeah, that's that even if you don't really have any major trauma, I think that's a good thing for all of us. You
Mhm.
know what I mean? To incorporate something that we want to do, really want to do. And that's the thing about work. Sometimes you get so saturated with just doing, you know, to get through, but and then you don't do anything for yourself to
Mhm.
put joy in your life, you know? Yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
So misconception, how does trauma healing different from just coping with trauma? How does the healing differ from just coping? How can you
Well,
differentiate?
when you're coping with trauma, you learn to live with it. You're
Mhm.
basically creating your life within the boundaries your trauma gives you. You have the limiting beliefs, you have the self-sabotaging behavior, you have the fears and the doubt, the perfectionism, the need to control everything. All of that is within the parameters the trauma gives you. Now, when you're healing trauma, you're releasing it. It's not there anymore, which means all the traits you want, like being confident, being courageous, being outspoken, setting healthy boundaries, fulfilling your dreams, that is coming back up as you heal your trauma. There's not much work to do other than healing your trauma, and all the good things are coming back up. You're changing, you're shifting. So healing means letting go completely of trauma and transforming into the new, amazing version of yourself. Whereas coping is staying within the parameters that trauma gives you. You're designing your life around your trauma. You make your life work with your trauma. That's coping.
Some people say that trauma is a lifelong lifelong battle rather than a process that has an end. What did you say to that?
They haven't met me yet.
Come on
Well,
over.
well, it's a
Hey.
belief system. If you have been taught
Mhm.
from your parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, A, you don't talk about it. B, you don't go to therapy. What if the neighbors find out?
That's so
You know,
true. Yes.
I
What
was
happened?
brought up
Oh,
with
stay at
that.
home. Yeah.
Yes. I was brought up with that, and I was like, nope, I don't care. Yes. And so, yeah, if you have never experienced how beautiful it is to really release your trauma, you don't
Mhm.
know what it feels like. This is one of
Yeah.
the things that you have to see to believe.
Right. Right.
So when
Right.
you say, well, trauma is a lifelong issue, then I would say to that, whether you believe you can or you believe you cannot, you are right because you're believing that. So in order to heal, you have to at least give it the benefit of the doubt that it's possible. You don't have to believe it, but just, the little doubt, well, it could be possible. That's all that's needed to continue your journey. But if you flat out believe it's not possible, then yeah, you most likely will suffer from trauma for the rest of your life because that's what you believe.
So the mind shift is that they need to shift. The mind shift should be to embrace their personal power, the inner power that they have to overcome. Huh?
Very true. But if you're
Yes.
dealing with deep trauma, it's very difficult to step into empowerment because trauma is keeping you hostage. It's like a jail that you create yourself.
Right.
You're
Right.
staying in that jail. So you have to open the door and walk through and have faith that on the other side it's better.
Right.
Whether you know it or not, you just have to have faith that it is better. I mean, I'm not the only one. So there's so many people saying it is possible.
Right. 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 Right.
But
Right.
it's up to you to take the first step.
Um, do you have any clients or any situation where the transformation was so profound that you witnessed when they adopted your methods?
Yes. I was working with a client a few years ago. She had been through intense trauma, really bad. Narcissistic relationship. She's in my book, which
Hmm.
means I can
Yes.
talk
Yes.
about
Yes.
it because she gave me
Yeah.
permission,
Hmm.
right? So very like she was molested by her father. She had a narcissistic relationship where he was so brutal physically and mentally. He forced her to have an abortion and
Oh,
get her
wow.
tube tied when she was in her 20s, and the doctor did it. So, and from that, she was moving into drugs and alcoholism. Now, when we met, I was just starting with my modality and I needed some practice clients. So that's how we met and started working together. And we worked on her trauma, we released it, and now she's 5 years sober and living a happy life. So just healing the trauma completely changed her life.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Now, if you could give one message to trauma survivors who feel hopeless, what would it be?
Trauma is not a life sentence. You have the power to heal, and you're so worth it. So don't give up on yourself.
Mhm. Okay, that's a good answer. How has your view of trauma changed over the years as both a survivor and as a healer? How has it changed?
Well, I've just gained so much wisdom of what trauma is and isn't.
Right.
So it's like I had to grow into my role as a healer.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing how much you can achieve when you really just think a little outside the box, stretch your imagination and let it guide you. Because triggers are not the enemy. Triggers can be released, and their triggers are the key to releasing your trauma.
Right, right,
So
right.
just the understanding of how it needs to be done is mind-blowing.
Okay. Well, that was actually our last question. So if you would like to tell our listeners how to, how to get in touch with you and about your book and all those nice things there.
Sure. Well, you can find me on my website, riseaboveyourstory.com. If you feel drawn to learn more about me and what it feels like, or if you feel you would like to work with me, I offer a free consultation, which you can also book through my website. You can find me on Facebook under Rise Above Your Story, and you can find me on YouTube under Sandra Cruz Unfiltered. And I've
All
got my
right.
book, Amazon, Journey to Yourself, How to Heal from Trauma, written by someone who did.
Right. To everyone who listened, if this conversation, resonates with you, don't wait another moment. Yes. Take the next step to your healing journey. Connect with Sandra, dive into her wisdom, and discover how true lasting healing is possible. Healing is possible. Transformation is within each of us and within reach. And as Sandra has shown us today, your past does not define you. Until next time, keep rising, keep healing, and keep embracing your power.